I came home from the hospital to find my bedroom door missing. Not closed. Missing. The smell hit me before I even stepped inside: dog food, wet fur, and something sour. Where my bed used to be stood a large crate with a dog bed and chew toys scattered around. My son glanced up from the couch, barely paused his game, and said, "Max needed the space. You'll be fine downstairs." I still had the hospital bracelet on. My hip was stitched. My heart? Torn open. That room held 40 years of my life. Now, it belonged to a Labrador. Before we continue, I'd love to know, where are you watching from today? Comment below. I wasn't always seen as a burden in my own home. Once upon a time, that house rang with laughter, filled with smells of fresh cornbread and wood polish. Marjorie made that house a home, and I built every plank of it with my own hands. Back then, my son, Timmy, we called him when he was little, used to follow me around with a toy hammer, mimicking every swing. He'd say, "One day, I'll build big things too, Daddy." I used to believe him. Marjorie and I bought the land in '79. It was nothing but overgrown brush and a half-collapsed shed. I saw possibility, she saw the future. Together, we saw home. Every paycheck I earned from the mill went into that foundation. Weekends were spent digging, sawing, hammering until my fingers bled. And at night, when the cicadas quieted down, Marjorie would bring me lemonade and kiss the sawdust off my face. When Timmy came along, he was the center of our universe. He was a sensitive kid, more interested in squirrels and clouds than sports. He once cried because a butterfly got stuck in a window screen. That was my boy. Gentle. Kind. We raised him to look people in the eye, say please and thank you, and never turn his back on family. Christmas mornings were a whole production. Marjorie made cinnamon rolls from scratch, and Timmy would tear down the stairs so fast he'd almost miss the last few. We didn't have much, but we made memories like they were gold. Every summer, we pitched a tent in the backyard and made shadow puppets until he fell asleep in my lap. I still remember the weight of his little head on my chest, the trust in that quiet breathing. Things were good. Really good. I worked hard at the mill, came home to warm meals and warmer hugs. Even when my back ached and my hands couldn't hold a coffee mug straight, I never complained. I had a purpose. My family needed me. And then Marjorie got sick. At first it was just for getting the groceries. Then it was for getting the stove. Then me. I took care of her at home. Refused to send her to any place with linoleum floors and nurses who changed shifts more than diapers. She'd have hated that. So I quit my job early, dipped into retirement sooner than planned, and cared for her every day. Washed her hair in the sink like she used to do for Timmy. Read her favorite poems even when she stared past me like I wasn't there. Timmy was in college by then. He visited less and less. Midterms, Dad. Finals. My thesis. I understood. Kids have their own lives. But it hurt. Watching her fade while our son drifted further away. When she passed, it felt like the house exhaled. Quiet all the time. Too quiet. I thought Timmy would come stay for a while. Help fill the silence. He did, for a week. Then he was gone again, back to the city, back to his job. It wasn't until 5 years later that he asked if he could move back for a while. Something about a bad breakup and needing time to reset. I didn't hesitate. I told him, of course, son. This is your home too. He showed up with more boxes than I expected, and a dog. Max was a big, friendly golden retriever with a loud bark and a constant tail wag. I didn't mind him, not at first. He brought life into the house again. And Timmy, well, he looked more relaxed, more like the boy I remembered. We even shared a few nights watching old westerns, laughing about Clint Eastwood's grimace. For a while, it felt like things might be healing. I didn't notice the shift right away. Little things. Max getting the couch while I took the armchair. Timmy sleeping in most mornings while I made breakfast. Me picking up dog poop in the yard because he's just not used to new routines yet. I didn't complain. I wanted peace. I wanted my son. Still, I started to feel like I was walking around someone else's house. My chair became Max's nap spot. My fridge started storing fancy dog meals. I even caught Timmy brushing the dog's teeth once, my toothbrush, no less. I replaced it without saying a word. Looking back, I think I kept my silence too long. But it's hard to speak up when you spent your whole life giving. When your hands are calloused from building something meant to outlive you, and the very people you built it for start closing the doors on you. I clung to the past, those backyard campouts, those cinnamon rolls, those soft breaths on my chest. I told myself he'd remember. That the boy who cried over butterflies was still in there somewhere. But the house was changing, and so was he. And I didn't yet realize just how far he'd gone. It was subtle at first. You don't wake up one morning and realize your son doesn't respect you anymore. It creeps in. Like mold behind wallpaper, hidden, quiet, poisonous. I remember the first time he corrected me at the dinner table. I had mentioned something about inflation and grocery prices, and Tim as he insists now, chuckled and said, "Dad, you can't compare now to the 70s. Economics have evolved. You wouldn't understand." He waved his hand like he was swatting away a fly. I laughed it off, but it stung. A week later, I was trying to change a light bulb in the hallway when he came out of his room and said, "You really shouldn't be climbing ladders at your age, Dad. Just ask me next time." His tone wasn't concerned, it was annoyed. Like I was some doddering fool who'd wandered out of his room. I nodded and stepped down slowly, pretending my knees weren't aching from the effort. That same night, I overheard him talking on the phone. I didn't mean to eavesdrop, I was just heading to the kitchen for a glass of water. He was pacing in the living room and said, "Yeah, I'm staying with the old man for now. It's kind of cramped, but at least I don't have to pay rent." He laughed. Laughed. Like I was just some free motel with a history. I stood in the hallway, heart sinking, wondering when my home became just a convenience for him. A stopgap. A step down. Max, the dog, was the only one who greeted me every morning. Tail wagging, tongue hanging out, he didn't care about my opinions or my arthritis. Just wanted a scratch behind the ears and maybe a treat. Some days I'd sit on the porch with Max, quietly sipping coffee, wondering when the boy who once cried when I scraped my knee had become this aloof man who barely looked up from his phone. It was Max's birthday when I noticed something that really bothered me. Yes, his birthday. Tim had bought the dog a cake. A full-on dog cake. Invited some friends over. There were streamers. Presents. Even a party hat. But when I mentioned my upcoming 75th birthday the next day, Tim just blinked and said, "Oh yeah, right. We'll do something low-key, yeah." We didn't. The next day came and went. No card. No cake. Not even a "happy birthday" until around 10 p.m., when I coughed and said, 75 isn't nothing." He looked up from his phone, half grinned. "Oh. Right. Happy birthday, Dad." I smiled back, but inside, something cracked. He started making comments about the layout of the house. This dining room could totally be opened up into the kitchen," he said one evening while scrolling through renovation ideas on his tablet. "Would make the place more modern. All this wood paneling. So outdated." I ran my hand along the wall. I had nailed every panel. With Marjorie watching from the hallway, arms folded, telling me, "You missed a spot right there." Now, it was just outdated. He didn't ask before rearranging furniture. He moved the recliner, my recliner, so Max had more space to stretch out. I stubbed my toe trying to find it in the dark one night. "Oh, sorry," Tim said when I mentioned it. "The dog likes having more room." The dog. Max. He was a good boy. Too good for what he was being used for, a shield, a buffer. An excuse. Tim's tone grew sharper whenever I asked about his plans. "When are you thinking of moving out?" I once asked, gently. He didn't even look up. "Why? You trying to kick me out?" "No, no. I was just. I'm saving money, Dad. You always told me to be smart with money. Or does that advice only count when you're the one giving it?" I didn't ask again. He stopped doing simple things, like taking out the trash or mowing the lawn. Said his work-from-home schedule was too tight. I started doing everything again, cooking, cleaning, even walking Max. And with each passing day, I began to feel more like a guest in my own home. One afternoon, I was dusting the living room when I noticed a stack of unopened mail on the counter. Mostly bills. But one envelope stood out, thick, glossy, with the return address of a local real estate firm. My hands trembled slightly as I opened it. It was a brochure. A promotional mailer showcasing renovated homes and maximized equity opportunities. On the bottom, in Tim's handwriting, was a note, "Possible remodel after appraisal?" I set it down, my stomach sinking. He had started seeing the house as a project. A stepping stone. Something to flip, not cherish. Not protect. I tried to tell myself I was overreacting. That maybe he just wanted to improve things. But deep down, I knew. This wasn't about updating the house. It was about replacing me. And I still had no idea what was coming next. It was a Thursday. I remember because I had just gotten back from the clinic, nothing serious, just a checkup and some blood work. I moved slower these days, but I still liked to drive myself when I could. The nurse had said, "You're in good shape for 75. I smiled, thinking maybe I'd treat myself to a slice of pie when I got home. But I never made it to the kitchen. The front door was wide open. Not just unlocked, open. I stepped inside and called out, "Tim?" No answer. Then I saw it, my bedroom door, gone. Not open. Gone. Taken clean off the hinges. I stood frozen in the hallway, staring at the threshold to what used to be my sanctuary. It smelled like kibble, wet carpet, and something sour beneath it all. Where my bed used to be stood a giant wire crate. Inside it, Max was curled up on a plush dog bed, gnawing on one of my old slippers. Chew toys were scattered across the hardwood floor. My books, the ones Marjorie gave me over the years, were stuffed haphazardly into a cardboard box shoved in the corner. I turned slowly, heart thumping in my chest, and saw Tim lounging on the couch in the living room, a game controller in hand. He barely looked up. "Oh, hey. You're back." I stepped closer, voice low. "Where's my bed, Tim?" He didn't pause his game. "Storage." Max needed space to stretch. "That room's too small for both of you," and he was getting anxious. "It's just easier this way." "You gave my room to the dog?" Now he looked up, eyebrows raised like I was the unreasonable one. "You've got the guest room downstairs. It's got a bathroom and everything. And let's be real, Dad, stairs are good for your legs. Keeps the blood flowing." I stood there, gripping the back of a chair so hard my knuckles turned white. "That room has no heat vent. The window leaks. It was meant for storage, not sleeping." He shrugged. "Well, you'll manage. Max is family too, you know." Family. That word echoed in my ears like a cruel joke. I walked into the makeshift dog nursery and opened the box in the corner. My books, bent, water-stained. One of Marjorie's old photo albums was wedged underneath a rubber bone. Pages warped. Faces smeared. I picked it up slowly, my fingers trembling. "Did you even ask?" Tim stood in the doorway now, arms crossed. "Ask what?" "If I was okay with this. If I wanted my things moved. My bed gone. My room taken." He rolled his eyes. "You're overreacting. It's not like I threw your stuff away. It's just space. You're barely in here during the day." "I built this room," I said, voice cracking. "Every nail. Every beam. I built it for your mother and me. I laid her to rest in this house. And now you've handed it over to a dog like I'm nobody." He was silent for a moment. Then he scoffed. "God, you're so dramatic. It's not that deep." I stepped past him, the photo album clutched to my chest. I didn't say another word. I couldn't. My throat felt like it was closing up. That night, I slept in the basement. On a lumpy futon that still smelled like mothballs. My hip ached. The draft from the window chilled my legs. I lay awake staring at the ceiling, remembering how Marjorie used to say this house had a soul. "It remembers," she'd whisper. Every laugh, every fight, every quiet morning. I wondered what the house thought now. The following morning, I tried to find some normalcy. Made coffee. Sat on the porch. Max came bounding out, tail wagging, tongue flopping. He dropped a tennis ball at my feet. I looked at him, and I couldn't even be mad. He was just a dog. He didn't ask for this. But when Tim walked out a few minutes later and asked, "Hey, can you take Max to his vet appointment later? I've got a Zoom call," something in me broke. I didn't answer. I just stood up, went inside, and closed the basement door behind me. The final straw that day wasn't the room. It wasn't the books. It wasn't even the disrespect. It was the silence. The complete lack of remorse. Not once did he say sorry. Not once did he even acknowledge what he had taken from me. That night, I opened the old chest I kept by the furnace. Inside were Marjorie's letters. Her recipes. A photo of us building the porch together, her hair tied up in a red scarf, dirt on her cheek. And at the very bottom, the deed to the house. My name. Hers. No one else's. I sat with it in my lap for a long time, staring at the signature she made in that careful script. And I realized, the boy we raised was gone. In his place stood a man who saw me as an inconvenience. An obstacle. A thing to move out of the way. And I had moved. But not for much longer. I don't know what made me go into his room that day. Maybe it was the growing ache in my chest that wouldn't go away. Or maybe it was the silence, that kind of heavy, unnatural quiet that feels like something's being hidden just beneath the surface. Tim had left in a rush that morning. Some brunch with friends. He'd called out over his shoulder, "Don't forget Max's kibble is running low," and slammed the door before I could reply. I stood in the hallway for a long while, just staring at his door. It wasn't locked. Never had been. But walking into your child's room as a parent always feels like trespassing, even when they're 35 and treating your house like a hotel. Still, I opened it. The room was cluttered. Not dirty, just messy in that self-centered way. Clothes draped over chairs, gadgets plugged into every socket, dog toys on the floor. A pair of shoes on my mother's old quilt, folded neatly at the end of the bed. That stung more than I expected. I wasn't sure what I was looking for. I opened drawers. Flipped through receipts. Nothing suspicious. Then I saw the envelope on the desk. It was thick, sealed with a sticker that read, "Confidential, attorney-client privilege." I knew I shouldn't. But I did. Inside were printed emails, a draft contract, and a letter addressed to Timothy H. Sanders. The heading read, Preliminary Consultation Regarding Property Transfer and Living Trust Agreement. My knees buckled. I sat down hard in his desk chair, the documents trembling in my hands. It was all there, an outline of transferring the property into his name under a family trust, citing my declining health and residential instability as justification. There was even a note from the lawyer suggesting I be gently encouraged to consider the benefits of assisted living, given recent mobility issues. Mobility issues? I was walking Max every morning. Still mowing the damn lawn when Tim wasn't too lazy to get off the couch. But to a stranger reading those words, I sounded like a man one step from a wheelchair. Then came the line that sealed it, discuss possible timing for transition to assisted care after Q3, with minimal disruption to K9's environment. To the K9's environment. My throat burned. My hands shook. He wasn't just pushing me out, he was planning it behind my back. Framing it like a kindness. Like I was some burden he'd been heroically carrying. And all to protect the dog's sense of comfort. I sat there for a long time, the words swimming on the page. I thought about Marjorie. How she would have reacted. Her voice rang in my head, soft but stern, don't let people write your story for you, George. This wasn't just about a room anymore. Or even respect. It was about being erased. Rewritten. Packaged into someone else's narrative. Tim had already started replacing me, in the home, in the records, in the law. That night, I didn't say a word when he came home. He didn't notice my silence. Didn't ask how my day was. Just turned on the TV, tossed Max a treat, and sat back like nothing had changed. I watched him from the kitchen, wondering how many times I had bailed him out, when his business failed, when his girlfriend left and he spiraled, when he moved back home, just for a month, that turned into 2 years. I thought about the time Marjorie stayed up all night sewing his graduation gown because the one the school provided didn't fit right. Or when she made him tomato soup from scratch every time he had a cold, just because he once said it reminded him of being safe. And now this was what he gave in return. I went to the basement and opened the bottom drawer of the old cabinet where we kept the documents. Marjorie had always been organized, she even labeled everything with little handwritten tabs. I pulled out our will. It was yellowed, but intact. It still had her handwriting on the final page where she added, George gets final say if anything changes. I sat on the old futon with that will in my lap and thought for a long time. Thought about the shelter Marjorie used to volunteer at. The way she used to cry every time they had to turn a dog away because they ran out of space. How she once said, if I ever had money to spare, I'd build them a palace. Every stray deserves a second chance. And then, slowly, a different kind of thought crept in. A firm one. Cold and clear. What if this house became that palace? Not for Max. Not for Tim. But for the ones Marjorie never forgot. Over the next few days, I began watching Tim differently. Not like a father hoping to reconnect, but like a man quietly gathering evidence. He started talking on the phone more often in the evenings, closing the door when he used to keep it open. I caught pieces of phrases, shouldn't be hard, just need the paperwork, he'll go along with it, he always does. He thought I was still that man. I wasn't. Not anymore. Have you ever felt betrayed by your own family? Let us know in the comments. And don't forget to like and subscribe for more true life stories. The breaking point didn't come in an explosion. It came with a knock. A small, polite knock on the front door one Thursday afternoon. I opened it to find a woman in a navy blue blazer holding a clipboard. She smiled like she had good news. Mr. Sanders? My name is Elaine. I'm a care transition coordinator from Oakview Assisted Living. I just wanted to drop off a welcome packet. Your son said you'd be expecting me. I stared at her. My fingers tightened on the doorframe. I'm sorry, I said slowly, you're from where? She held out the folder, her smile flickering. Oakview. We have a beautiful facility just 20 minutes away. Your son mentioned some concerns about stairs and your mobility. I closed the door without another word. Behind it, my breathing was shallow. I felt like my ribs were closing in. My hands were shaking again, but this time with rage, not fear. He didn't even have the decency to talk to me first. I heard him come in 2 hours later. Whistling. Carrying a smoothie and laughing at something on his phone. I stood by the kitchen sink, waiting. When he saw me, he flinched. Just for a second. Then came that half smile. Hey. Something up? I walked over and set the Oakview packet on the counter between us. His eyes dropped to it. His jaw tensed. Tim, I said quietly, tell me the truth. How long have you been planning to put me in a home? He raised his hands like I was being unreasonable. It's not what you think. Then what is it? I was trying to help, Dad. You're not exactly thriving here. The stairs, the cold basement. You should be somewhere warm. Somewhere comfortable. Oakview has physical therapy, activities, hell, they've got shuffleboard. Tim. Look me in the eye and say this is about me. He didn't. Say it's not about you wanting this house for yourself. Say it's not about getting me out of the way. Jesus, Dad. He scoffed and turned away. You're so paranoid. Why would I even? Because you already changed the locks on the upstairs linen closet, I snapped. Because you already moved your files into the guest room. Because you called lawyers, Tim. Behind my back. His face flushed. I was just getting information. That's not illegal. No, I said, voice flat. Just gutless. He bristled. You don't get it. You think just because you built this house, it's yours forever? You're old, Dad. Things change. People change. I stared at him. And in that moment, I didn't see my son. I saw a stranger wearing his face. A shallow, insecure man who wanted comfort without responsibility. Who loved his dog more than his father. Who thought old meant optional. I didn't say another word. I walked back to the basement. But something shifted that night. I started making calls. First to an old friend, Arnold, who used to practice elder law before he retired. He'd helped Marjorie and me with the first version of our will. He remembered us immediately. When I told him what was going on, there was a long pause on the line. Then he said, George, meet me at my place Monday morning. Bring everything. We'll make this right. Next, I called Mrs. Connolly, the shelter coordinator Marjorie used to volunteer with. She was surprised to hear from me. I was wondering, I said, if there's still a need for property or space. For dogs. She nearly cried on the phone. Said the shelter was bursting. Said they'd dreamed of expanding for years, but land prices were impossible. I might be able to help, I told her. But it has to be quiet for now. She understood. By the end of the week, I had copies of every relevant document. I scanned the deed, the old will, Marjorie's handwritten amendment. I stored everything in a locked drawer at the back of the tool shed. Meanwhile, I played along. I smiled when Tim asked how my mobility was. I nodded when he suggested I look into assisted living, just for a tour. I even asked about Max's food like I still had a stake in that mutt's happiness. Inside, I was done. Not angry. Not bitter. Just done. The next time I walked past the room that used to be mine, I didn't look inside. I didn't need to. The past was gone. But so was the illusion. One afternoon, as I was raking leaves near the edge of the yard, old Mr. Fielder next door leaned on the fence and said, "I heard from Nora at the pharmacy that Tim's been telling folks you're moving to Oakview. That true?" I looked at him and smiled gently. "Not exactly." He nodded slowly, sensing something in my tone. "If you ever need a hand, George, you know where I am." I did. And I appreciated it more than he knew. What surprised me most was how calm I felt. I had no desire to yell, to confront, to shame. No, I wanted something better. Justice. Quiet, clean, irreversible. I had no plans to fight Tim for affection. No need to plead for my place in the home I built. Instead, I'd take the place back. And I'd give it to someone who deserved it, even if that someone had 4 legs and a bark. The shelter would get this house. And Tim would get the lesson Marjorie once whispered to him when he was 12 and lying to cover up a broken vase. You don't get to keep what you tried to steal. Arnold's place hadn't changed since the last time I'd visited, maybe 10 years ago for his retirement luncheon. Still smelled like old paper and lemon polish. Still cluttered with leather books and plaques he never dusted. But the man himself? If anything, he looked sharper than ever. Thinner, sure. Slower on his feet. But those blue eyes missed nothing. He sat across from me, scanning the documents I'd brought, glasses perched low on his nose. I watched him as he read, the lines on his forehead deepening. When he finally looked up, he said, "You're sure about this, George?" "As sure as I've ever been about anything." He nodded, took a breath, and leaned back in his chair. "Well," he said, "you've got a strong case. You're the sole title holder. The house was never gifted, never co-signed, never refinanced with his name on it. That will from 1997 is still valid, especially with Marjorie's handwritten amendment. But if you want to make it ironclad, we rewrite it." "I want it airtight," I said. "No wiggle room." Arnold leaned forward, clicked his pen, and began. We spent 2 hours going over every clause. I explained what Tim had been doing, the Oakview visit, the shifted rooms, the paperwork I found. Arnold listened without interruption. When I told him about my plan to donate the house to the shelter, he looked up. "You're serious?" As a heart attack. He scribbled something, then said, "You want to include a contest clause?" "A what?" "If anyone contests the will, everything goes to a fallback recipient. Most people use a charity. It stops greedy heirs from thinking they can negotiate their way in. If Tim challenges it, he loses everything. No compromise." I smiled slowly. "Make it the veterans' shelter," I said. Marjorie volunteered there too. By the time we finished, the final version was simple but crystal clear. Upon my death, the home and all land attached shall be donated to the Oakwood Animal Shelter. All remaining financial assets to be split between Oakwood Shelter and the Veteran Support Center. Any individual who contests this will forfeit all inheritance. Arnold slid the papers across the table. "You want to add a statement?" I looked at him. "Something personal?" He handed me a separate sheet and a pen. I thought for a moment, then wrote. "To my son Timothy, I gave you every chance. What you lost wasn't mine to give, it was yours to keep, if you'd only earned it. I hope one day, you understand the weight of dignity. And the cost of treating people like placeholders." When I finished, my hand was trembling. Arnold said nothing. He just nodded once, solemn and slow. We had it notarized that day. As I walked out of his office, the air felt lighter. The sun was warm on my face. For the first time in months, I felt like a man again, not a relic waiting to be boxed up and relocated. Back home, Tim was lounging on the porch with Max sprawled at his feet. He was laughing at something on his phone again, completely unaware. He looked up and said, "Where've you been?" "Lawyers," I replied. His eyes flicked to mine. Lawyer? You okay? Never better. He stared at me for a beat longer than usual. Then shrugged. All right. Well, let me know if you need anything. Max's vet bill's due tomorrow, by the way. I nodded and went inside. He had no idea he'd just lost everything he thought he had in his back pocket. That night, I found one of Marjorie's old journals in the bookshelf. It was the year Tim turned 16, the year we nearly lost the house during the recession. Her entry read, "George sold his truck so Tim could keep his soccer camp spot. He doesn't know. George said, let him run. He only gets one youth. I married a man who keeps giving, even when it hurts." I closed the book gently and held it to my chest. She'd always known me better than anyone. But I think she would have agreed with this. There comes a time when even the most generous heart has to set a boundary. Not out of anger. Not out of spite. But out of love for oneself. For the values we try to teach. For the home we build. And now, this home, our home, was going to serve something better. Something kinder. Something more loyal than the son who once called me his old man, like I was a lawnmower past its warranty. I didn't need applause. I didn't want revenge. Just peace. And maybe a few barks echoing through the hallways. That'd be enough. It happened on a Sunday. That quiet, slow kind of Sunday where the light filters in just right and the coffee smells richer than usual. I was sitting at the kitchen table, reading a letter from an old army friend, when I heard Tim talking on the phone upstairs. His voice was low, but he wasn't exactly being discreet. Yeah, the old man's still in the basement. But it's happening soon. Oakview's got an opening Friday. Once he's out, we'll renovate the whole main floor, add a sunroom, maybe heated floors for Max. I stopped reading. I know, babe, I know. It's just, once he's gone, it's ours. I mean, legally it's still a gray area, but nobody's gonna fight a grieving son, right? And besides, we've already talked to the contractor. I stood up. The legs of my chair scraped against the tile. He paused upstairs. Then I heard, "Hey, I'll call you back." By the time he came downstairs, I was standing at the front door, coat on, papers under my arm. "Going somewhere?" he asked, feigning casual. I looked at him for a long moment. "Yes," I said. "Somewhere I'll be heard." He frowned, confused. But I didn't wait for the rest. I left. I drove straight to the town records office. Asked for certified property records. Had the new will filed with my attorney, notarized again for backup, and delivered copies to both shelters listed in the clause. I wanted no loopholes. No misunderstandings. By Tuesday, everything was in place. All that was left was the confrontation. I waited for the right moment, a public one. A moment where words couldn't be twisted or buried. That came 3 days later, at Sarah's birthday dinner. My granddaughter was turning 22. A bright, thoughtful girl. She'd been away at college most of the year, so she didn't know much about what had been happening. The dinner was being hosted at a rented event hall. Tim had insisted on it being adults only, so I knew he was treating it like a status event, one of those evenings where he could flash his grin and pretend he was the perfect son of a grateful old man. I wasn't invited. Not officially. But I showed up anyway. I wore my best jacket, the one Marjorie bought me for our anniversary. Tucked neatly under my arm was a manila envelope. Inside, the truth. I waited until the dinner was well underway. Waited until Tim had already made his little speech and Sarah had opened her gifts. Then I walked through the doors. Heads turned. Forks paused mid-air. Conversation stopped. Tim froze. "Dad," he said, walking toward me, voice tight. "What are you doing here?" I smiled. Calm. Gentle. I wanted to give Sarah a gift. One more personal than a check. He looked around nervously. We can talk later. I think now is better. He stepped forward, dropping his voice. You're making a scene. No, I said softly, you did that the moment you put my life up for sale. I walked to the front of the room, envelope in hand. Sarah looked concerned but not afraid. I addressed the room. My name is George Sanders. Many of you know me. Some of you helped me build the very house I've lived in for 50 years. Murmurs. Some nods. I'm here because truth should never be whispered. Especially when people hide behind manners to excuse betrayal. Tim was now approaching quickly, trying to intercept me, but I raised the envelope. In this folder is a revised will. One that removes my son from all inheritance. The house, my savings, everything, will now go to those who protect the voiceless. 2 shelters. 1 for animals. 1 for veterans. People gasped. A few audibly said, "Good for you." I held up my hand. I raised my son with honesty, work ethic, and love. But somewhere along the way, he forgot those things. He made plans to evict me. To remodel the home I built with my wife. To profit off my absence. Silence. No one moved. Tim was pale now. Dad, please. I turned to Sarah. I want you to know this isn't about punishment. It's about truth. You deserve to live in a world where people mean what they say. Where elders are not disposable. And where dogs don't get better rooms than fathers. She stood up and came over to hug me. Then, quietly, someone clapped. A slow, solitary clap from the back. It caught on. Others joined. Polite, uncomfortable. But it was enough. I left the envelope on the gift table. Then I walked out. The night air was sharp. But it felt clean. Honest. I didn't look back. I didn't need to. I woke the next morning feeling strangely clear. Like something inside me had unclenched after being wound tight for months, maybe years. The sun came through the window just right, lighting up the photo of Marjorie on my nightstand. She was smiling in that way she did, like she knew something about me I hadn't yet remembered. I whispered, "I did it, Marge." Finally. But I wasn't done yet. The family had heard the words. They'd seen the documents. But Tim hadn't looked me in the eye and faced what he'd become. Not yet. I wanted to see if he could. So I invited him to lunch. I picked a diner downtown. Small, quiet. The kind of place we used to go after Sunday church, back when Tim was still chasing soccer cleats and dreaming of being a firefighter. He showed up 10 minutes late. No Max. No leash in hand. Just Tim, slacks, collared shirt, tension all over his face. He sat down across from me, lips pressed tight. "So," he said. "You really did it." "I did," I replied, folding my hands. He scoffed. "Do you know how that made me look in front of everyone? You humiliated me." "You humiliated yourself," I said gently. "I was trying to take care of things," he shot back. "Planning ahead. You're not exactly 25 anymore. You planned me into a nursing home without a word. That's not taking care, Tim. That's control." His jaw clenched. He looked out the window. "You had a whole room for a dog," I said. "And shoved me into a basement. What part of that looks like love to you?" He didn't answer. Max doesn't lie. Doesn't pretend. He knows who feeds him, walks him, cares for him. He gives loyalty where it's deserved. Tim exhaled sharply, shaking his head. All this over a dog. No, I said. All this over respect. The waitress came by. We didn't order anything. She gave us a look and left us alone. You think this makes you righteous? Tim said bitterly. That house was supposed to be mine. You promised. I promised you a home, I replied. I never promised you the deed. You're punishing me because I wanted better for us. No. I'm protecting what your mother and I built, from someone who treats people like furniture that needs rearranging. He opened his mouth, but nothing came out. I reached into my coat pocket and pulled out a small photo. Me, Marjorie, and Tim as a toddler. Her hair was windswept, my mustache was terrible, and Tim's face was smeared with ice cream. I slid it across the table. I remember that day, I said. You fell and scraped your knee. Thought it was the end of the world. Marjorie carried you back to the car, humming, while I wiped your tears. We didn't have 2 pennies to rub together, but we had each other. Tim stared at the photo. I gave you every tool to become a better man, I continued. And somewhere, you traded that toolbox for entitlement. His hand trembled slightly as he reached for the photo, then stopped. I didn't mean to hurt you, he muttered. But you did, I said. And that has consequences. We sat in silence for a while. Then he looked up. His voice was hoarse. So, that's it? You're just cutting me off. I'm cutting off what's rotten, I said. You can still rebuild something. But it won't come from my wallet. He stood up slowly. You think you're the only one hurting? I've been drowning trying to keep up. Bills, Natalie's expectations, work stress. And that justifies betraying your father? His shoulders dropped. No, he said quietly. No, it doesn't. We stared at each other for a long time. 2 men with the same nose. Same brow. Different hearts. He left the photo on the table. Didn't say goodbye. Didn't look back. When I got home, I took out the photo again. Smoothed the edges. Placed it in a new frame beside Marjorie's. Let it remind me. Not of what I lost. But of what I chose not to let destroy me. Have you ever felt betrayed by your own family? Let us know in the comments. Do you think the father made the right choice? Comment and don't forget to like and subscribe for more true life stories. It's strange how quiet the house feels after a storm. No yelling. No barking. No heavy footsteps upstairs. Just the hum of the fridge and the soft creak of old floorboards settling in the cool of the evening. Max was gone now. Tim had taken him after our lunch, and I didn't fight it. I didn't have the heart to. The dog had always loved him more, or maybe he just sensed who needed him more. Either way, I let that be Tim's parting gift. Or burden. The days after the confrontation passed slowly, like honey in winter. No one called. Not Sarah. Not even Natalie, whose voice used to dominate every Sunday dinner. The silence wasn't just in the house. It followed me into town, into the bakery, the barbershop, the bench near the war memorial where I liked to sit and feed birds. People whispered. I saw it. Felt it. Some crossed the street when they saw me. Others offered awkward nods. Polite but unsure. The story had spread, of course. This wasn't a big city. It was the kind of town where everyone knows which dog belongs to who and whose truck has the good snow tires. Some thought I'd lost my mind. That old George Sanders had finally cracked and given everything to a bunch of mutts and strangers. But others understood. Mrs. Palmer, the librarian, stopped me one morning. She touched my arm gently and said, "Took guts, George. My brother did the same thing, only he didn't live long enough to sign the papers. His son sold the house before the body was cold." She didn't say anything else. just squeezed my arm and walked off. It meant more than I could say. I started walking more. Not far, just around the block, or to the pond behind the post office. The August air was sticky, but familiar. My legs hurt a little more these days, but I didn't mind. Moving helped. I'd sit on benches and think about Marjorie. She would have hated the drama. She always said, "Let the kids be selfish quietly, George. It's not your job to teach them humility, life will do that for you." But still, I think she would have understood. She hated injustice even more than she hated noise. I spent a whole afternoon in the attic one day. Digging through old boxes, half looking for something, half just needing to move. I found one of Sarah's old drawings. It was of me, standing next to the house, with a giant red heart on the roof and stick figure Max peeking out the front door. She must have been 7. I held it in my hands a long time. Was it wrong to hope she'd still come around? Even if her parents didn't? Maybe. But I hoped anyway. The house creaked again. This time louder. Not the usual shift. A knock. I startled. It had been nearly a week since I heard one of those. I opened the door. It was Roger, my neighbor from 3 doors down. Vietnam vet. Thick glasses. Always smelled like pipe tobacco and hand soap. "Thought you might need a second opinion on this forecast," he said, holding up a newspaper with the weather circled. I chuckled. "Come in, you old weatherman." He did. We sat at the table, sipping weak coffee, both of us pretending we weren't just 2 lonely old men pretending this was routine. "I heard what you did," he said, after a few minutes. "Word gets around," I nodded. "You did right," he said. "Might not feel like it now, but you did." I looked out the window. The sky was dimming. "I just didn't want to die being a burden," I said. "Or worse, being erased before I was gone." Roger nodded slowly. "My daughter did something similar," he said quietly. "Put me on a wait list for a home in Florida. Thought she was doing me a favor. I hadn't even seen the place." "What did you do?" He smiled faintly. "Moved out here. Bought the house cash. Changed my number. Haven't heard from her in 4 years." We sat in the silence that followed. It wasn't heavy. Just real. Before he left, Roger clapped my shoulder. "You come by if you need anything, George. My porch light's always on." That night, I slept without waking. No dreams. No basement ceiling. Just the full weight of my own bed beneath me. For the first time in a long while, it felt like mine again. Not borrowed. Not tolerated. Mine. It was the smell of lavender that did it. I was in Marjorie's old sewing room, sifting through a cedar chest of her fabric scraps, when the scent hit me, soft, sweet, almost like she'd just walked out the door. I stood there, my hand on a piece of yellow flannel, heart thumping like I was 20 again and watching her dance barefoot in the kitchen. She used to sew blankets for the local shelter during winters. Said every soul deserved something warm, even if they couldn't say thank you. And just like that, something clicked. What if the house wasn't just meant to be saved from Tim? What if it was meant to be given? Not just the deed. Not just the gesture. But the space. The air. The rooms that used to hold lullabies and Sunday pies and quiet goodbyes. What if I filled them again? With life. With purpose. I sat at the kitchen table for hours, sketching ideas on the back of old bills. A transitional home for abandoned pets? Maybe. A gathering space for local fosters? Maybe. Then the idea sharpened. What if the house became a rehabilitation home, for dogs left behind in storms, aging dogs nobody wanted, dogs like Max before we took him in? I didn't need the whole place to myself. And truthfully, the silence had started to echo too loudly. The next morning, I called up Lydia. She ran the local animal shelter, a tired little place off the main road that smelled like bleach and wet hope. She picked up after 2 rings. "George? Everything all right?" "I've got a crazy idea," I said. She laughed. "Now you've got me interested." An hour later, she was sitting in my living room, eyes wide as I told her the plan. "You want to turn your house into a sanctuary?" she asked. "Partially," I said. "The upstairs can stay living space, maybe for a caretaker or volunteer. But the basement and the back addition could be modified. Safe space for older dogs, ones with no place left to go." She was quiet for a moment. Then she said, "You know how many applications we get from people begging us to hold just one more dog? Families moving, elderly owners dying, people giving up. We say no more than we say yes, George." I nodded. "I have space. I have time. And I have every reason to give something better than what I've been given." Lydia's eyes welled up. "You'd need permits," she said. "Inspections. Modifications." "I've got some money saved," I replied. "And time." She smiled, the kind that made her look 10 years younger. "We'll make it happen." And so it began. The house that had once been a battlefield slowly turned into a blueprint. I called Roger. He showed up with a tool belt and a cooler of beer. Then came Carla, a retired vet tech who'd heard through the grapevine and wanted to help set up the right kind of flooring and ventilation. A local kid named Benny came by after school to help clear out the back shed. Didn't ask for money. Said his grandma used to know my wife. Every hammer hit, every paint stroke, every plank of reinforced fencing felt like a stitch in a wound I hadn't realized was still open. One afternoon, I stood in the middle of what used to be the den. It was now outfitted with cozy dog beds, low lighting, and a soft radio hum playing classical music. I pictured Max there. And Marjorie. And me, not forgotten, not cast aside, but woven into something real again. Lydia walked in holding a small, blind terrier in a green sling. "This is Gracie," she said. "Found her behind a dumpster. Can't see a thing but still wags her tail when you talk." I crouched down. "Hi there, sweetheart," I whispered. Gracie's tail moved. I smiled. "We've got room for you now. I used to think family was something you were born into. That blood-determined loyalty. That your last name came with some kind of invisible contract, one that meant you'd be loved, looked after, remembered. Turns out, I was wrong." The first night we opened the sanctuary officially, the house felt full in a way it hadn't in years. There were no party streamers, no ribbon cutting. Just 5 old dogs in cozy beds, a few volunteers drinking weak lemonade on the porch, and a full moon casting long shadows on the front lawn. But it was enough. Carla stayed behind to mop the kitchen floor after everyone left. Said it reminded her of her childhood home, the way the tiles clicked underfoot. Roger brought by a batch of his famous oatmeal cookies the next morning. "For the staff," he said, pretending not to notice I was the only one in the kitchen. Even Benny came back, this time with his little sister, who spent an hour combing one of the dogs with a plastic brush while humming under her breath. We started to form routines. Walks at 7 a.m. Feeding at 8 o'clock. Vet checks every other Thursday. Gracie, the blind terrier, had claimed the spot by the old fireplace. She'd spin in a little circle before settling into her bed, sighing like a tiny grandmother. I started calling her Boss Lady. The volunteers loved it. I found myself laughing more. Not the polite kind of chuckle you use in public, but the deep, gut-level kind that starts in the belly and shakes loose dust from old bones. One afternoon, I was out in the garden pulling weeds when I heard footsteps on the gravel path. I looked up. Natalie. She stood there in a crisp blouse, her hair tied up, holding a mason jar of something I couldn't quite see. "Hi, Grandpa," she said quietly. I wiped my hands on my jeans. "Didn't think I'd see you again," I said. She hesitated. "I didn't know if I should come." Dad said, "Well, he's angry. Really angry." I figured. She stepped closer. "I'm not here for his sake." I raised an eyebrow. "I saw the video," she continued. "The one Mom filmed when you stood up at the party. I heard what you said. I didn't know they were planning all that. Didn't expect you to." She looked down, then held out the jar. "Marjorie's peach jam recipe. I found it in one of Mom's drawers. Thought you might like a batch." I took it slowly. "Thanks." She sat beside me on the bench, watching one of the dogs chase a butterfly across the lawn. "I don't agree with what Dad did," she said. "And I don't think giving your room to Max was funny. It was cruel." I let that hang in the air. "I miss Sunday dinners," she added. "I miss Grandma's stories. I miss this house smelling like coffee and bread." I nodded. "Me too." We sat in silence, broken only by the soft chime of the wind blowing through the porch bells. "I'm glad you're doing something with this place," she said at last. "It feels alive." "It is," I said. "Not the same as before, but alive in a different way. A better way, maybe." Natalie reached out and touched my hand. "I'd like to come help. If that's all right." I looked at her. For a moment, I saw her as a toddler again, pulling at my pant leg, asking for one more story before bed. "All right," I said softly. "But only if you scoop the poop too." She laughed. "Deal." As the weeks rolled on, more people came. Not family by blood, not anymore, but family all the same. Lydia brought her teenage son to paint a mural in the hallway. It was a big tree with dog names carved into the trunk, leaves drifting above. Carla started offering basic vet care in the backroom, simple checkups for people in the neighborhood who couldn't afford full clinics. One woman showed up crying, holding a mutt wrapped in a blanket. "He's all I have," she said. We made room. That's what we did now. We made room. The house no longer echoed. It hummed, with footsteps, with laughter, with barks and clinking bowls. Sometimes, late at night, I'd sit on the porch and talk to Marjorie. Tell her about Boss Lady's latest antics. About Benny's little sister trying to teach a deaf Labrador to sit using only snacks and hand signals. About how Natalie showed up again with a box of blankets and a small notebook labeled Sanctuary Schedule. "I think you'd like her even more now," I'd whisper to the stars. And I think she would. I heard the car before I saw it. The tires crunched down the gravel drive, slow, hesitant, like the driver wasn't sure they belonged. I was out front trimming the hedge near the mailbox. It was warm that day, the kind of August heat that sticks to your neck and makes every movement feel twice as hard. The car door opened. Tim stepped out. For a second, I thought maybe I was hallucinating. But no. It was him. Same rigid jaw. Same expensive sunglasses. Same look of mild inconvenience etched into his face. He didn't move right away. Just stood there, holding something in his hand. Finally, he walked over. "Hi, Dad." I didn't say anything. Just kept trimming. I saw the news story," he said. "About the sanctuary. Channel 6 did a segment." I kept my eyes on the bush. "They said it's one of the first of its kind in the state," he went on. "A rehab space for senior dogs. Funded entirely by the founder. You." I finished the branch and turned off the shears. He looked older. Not in years, but in weight. Like guilt had slowly layered onto him over time. "I came to see it," he said. The house. You've seen the house, I said. He flinched. Dad. I know I messed up. I know what I said, what I did, was cruel. And I've thought about it every day since that party. I didn't answer. He rubbed the back of his neck. I didn't come for the inheritance. I know you changed the will. That's right. I guess I wanted to see it. What you did with the place. I stepped aside. You're welcome to look. He followed me through the gate. The front room still looked like it used to, mostly. But the dog beds, the crates in the back, the mural down the hallway, those told a different story. He paused by the mural. That's beautiful, he murmured. Benny's sister drew it, I said. He nodded, his eyes scanning the painted leaves, each with a dog's name inside. We walked through the kitchen, out back to the garden where Carla was tending to a limping shepherd. She looked up, saw Tim, gave him a polite but cool nod, then went back to her work. He didn't try to talk to her. Is this what you wanted? He asked. All this? No, I said honestly. I didn't want any of this. I wanted family. I wanted Sunday dinners and shared birthdays and a house full of laughter. He swallowed hard. But, I continued, when that was taken from me, I built something else. He looked away. I brought something, he said, holding out the small box he'd carried in. I opened it. Inside was Max's collar. I had it cleaned, he said. I wasn't very good to him either. I thought you might want to hang it somewhere here. I took it slowly. Thank you. We stood there in silence for a moment. Then he asked, is there any chance, any small chance, you and I could talk sometime? Maybe have coffee? I looked at him. And for once, I didn't feel the weight of all his wrongs. I felt my own peace. I'm not angry anymore, I said. But I'm not ready for coffee either. He nodded, a slow, resigned motion. I understand. He turned to go, but paused at the door. I know I may not deserve forgiveness. But I am sorry, Dad. Truly. I nodded. As he walked away, I looked down at Max's collar, running my fingers over the worn leather, the name tag still faintly clinking. Good boy, I whispered. Then I hung the collar on the hook by the fireplace, just above Boss Lady's bed. She stirred slightly and gave a little huff. You've got good company now, I said. And I meant it. Have you ever felt betrayed by your own family? Let us know in the comments. Do you think the father made the right choice? Comment and don't forget to like and subscribe for more true life stories. We called it Marjorie's Morning. Nothing flashy. No ribbon, no news vans, no speeches. Just a hand-painted wooden sign staked in the front lawn, Marjorie's house, senior dog sanctuary. Natalie made it herself. Said it felt more honest that way. The house smelled of fresh paint and cinnamon that morning. Carla baked muffins, oat and apple, and Benny brought balloons, though most of them popped before we even got them tied to the porch rail. A small crowd came. Not a crowd of politicians or donors, but of people who understood what it meant to be forgotten, and to be remembered again. There were the older couples who brought photos of pets long past. Kids from the neighborhood, curious and loud and full of questions. Veterans from the center down the road, some in wheelchairs, some walking slowly, all of them with eyes that had seen too much and hearts still open. And there were the dogs, waddling, snoring, barking softly as they claimed laps and shady spots beneath folding chairs. As I stood on the porch, I felt something shift inside me. Not the ache of loss, that had long settled into something quieter. It was pride. Not loud, not boastful. Just a stillness in the chest that said, you did right. I looked up at the house. The shutters had been repainted. The garden beds replanted. The wood panels sanded smooth. But it was still the house Marjorie and I built. Still the place where our son learned to walk, where we danced barefoot in the kitchen, where we buried our first dog under the maple tree. I walked inside. The photo of Marjorie in her apron, smiling, flower on her cheek, still hung in the hallway. Below it now, a new plaque. In loving memory of those who gave love freely and asked only for kindness in return. That was her. That was what she taught me, again and again, even when I didn't understand it the first time around. Natalie found me in the living room, her cheeks red from running around with the volunteers. She handed me a mug of coffee. "You okay, Grandpa?" I nodded. "Better than I've been in a long time." She smiled. "There's someone here who wants to see you." I raised an eyebrow. She gestured toward the front steps. A woman stood there, maybe late 50s, holding a framed photograph. She wore a soft green cardigan, and her hands trembled slightly. "I saw your flyer at the post office," she said. "My mother, she passed recently. She had a dog named Chester. 15 years. He passed just 2 weeks after." I walked down to meet her. "I'm sorry to hear that." She smiled, watery-eyed. They were both old. Both ready. But it's strange, isn't it? How quiet it gets. I nodded. She handed me the photo. A scruffy mutt, grinning beside an old woman in a rocking chair. "I just wanted to say thank you," she whispered. "For making this place. For remembering the ones who don't get remembered." Her words struck something deep. Not just because they were kind, but because for the first time in a long time, I didn't feel like I was holding on to a house of memories. I felt like I was building something new. As the sun rose higher, we gathered outside. We didn't say prayers. We didn't play music. We just sat together. People. Dogs. Strangers who weren't strangers anymore. I felt Marjorie there, in the breeze that tugged at the chimes, in the scent of cinnamon and lilac, in the warmth of Natalie's hand as she slipped her fingers into mine. "I think she'd be proud," Natalie said. I looked at her. "She always liked you best," I teased. She laughed. She had good taste. I leaned back in the rocking chair, the same one I'd nearly been tossed out of when Max took my room. That memory still stung, but the bitterness had gone. Replaced by something richer. Fuller. Justice doesn't always look like a gavel or a raised voice. Sometimes it's a porch full of sleeping dogs. Sometimes it's a sanctuary born from betrayal. Sometimes it's knowing that the home you built with love will keep giving it long after you're gone. That night, after everyone had left, I lit a candle by Marjorie's photo. "Looks like we finally threw the party you always wanted," I whispered. And I think, wherever she was, she smiled. Because Marjorie's house lived again. And this time, it was full of the kind of love that never asks for anything back. Just a tail wag. And a place to rest.